There's a version of you that is completely unbothered, not numb, not in denial, not pretending, but genuinely, deeply at peace, while the world around you falls apart. The Stoics didn't just imagine this version of themselves. They built it on purpose, brick by brick. Stay with me for a moment, because there's something most people never understand about Stoicism. They think it's about suppressing emotion, about being cold, distant, unfeeling, about gritting your teeth and pushing through. But that's not it. Not even close. The real philosophy, the one that Marcus Aurelius practiced while running an empire, that Epictetus practiced while living as a slave, that Seneca practiced while watching his world crumble, it wasn't about suppression. It was about transformation. There is one idea at the very heart of Stoic thought, one principle that once understood changes not just how you handle stress, but how you see yourself, your life, and your place in this world. We'll come back to it, but first, I need to tell you something about the kind of pain the Stoics were actually facing. We tend to think of ancient philosophers as men sitting in comfortable marble halls, sipping wine, debating ideas, with no real urgency. That image is almost entirely wrong. Marcus Aurelius spent more than half of his reign as emperor, not in Rome, but on the front lines of brutal Germanic wars. He wrote his famous meditations not in a quiet study, but in military camps, surrounded by death and mud and the constant threat of collapse. He lost children. He watched plagues tear through his empire. He was betrayed by people he trusted. And still, every morning, he sat down and wrote to himself, not about the chaos outside, but about the state of his mind within. Epictetus was born into slavery. He was physically abused. He had no freedom, no status, no control over where he slept or what he ate. By any external measure, his life was the opposite of peaceful. And yet, Epictetus became one of the most psychologically free human beings who ever lived. This is the first thing that must be understood. Stoicism was not philosophy for comfort. It was philosophy for survival. It was forged in suffering. Which means, and pay close attention here, everything the Stoics teach about peace was tested, not in theory, in real life, under enormous pressure. The world you wake up into every morning is, in many ways, louder than anything the Stoics faced. Not more violent, perhaps, but louder, more incessant, more relentless in its demands on your attention. The noise of the modern world isn't just external. It gets inside. It colonizes the mind. And before long, you're not just consuming noise, you're generating it. The inner chatter, the rehearsed arguments, the imagined disasters, the spiral of what-ifs that begins at 2 a.m. and doesn't stop until exhaustion finally forces your eyes shut. Here's where most people go wrong. They try to find peace by escaping the noise. A vacation, a night out, a new purchase, a distraction. But those things don't create silence. They just swap one noise for another. The Stoics understood something we are still struggling to accept. The noise is not the problem. Your relationship to the noise is the problem. Let's talk about what that looks like. Marcus Aurelius had a concept he returned to again and again in his private writings. He called it the inner citadel. Imagine a fortress, stone walls, thick gates, built not on a hillside, but inside you, in the center of your mind. The outer world, with all its chaos, all its unpredictability, all its noise, it can batter those walls. It can shake them. but it cannot enter unless you open the gate. This is not a metaphor for avoidance. The Stoics didn't advocate hiding from life. Marcus Aurelius ran an empire. He made brutal decisions every day. He couldn't walk away from the weight of the world. But he also didn't let the world move into his mind and rearrange the furniture. The inner citadel is the practice of knowing clearly, calmly, at all times, what is yours and what is not, what belongs to you and what belongs to the chaos outside. Your thoughts are yours, your values are yours, your responses are yours. And here's why this is so powerful. Anxiety, at its core, is the experience of trying to control things that aren't yours to control. It's reaching beyond the citadel walls, grabbing at the wind, and being exhausted by it. The moment you pull your hands back, the moment you say sincerely and completely, "That is not mine to carry," something releases in the chest, not because the problem went away, because you stopped making it a part of you. This is where everything changes. Pay attention to this, because this distinction is everything. Most people are suffering not from failure, but from a misdirected desire. They are wanting the right things in the wrong direction, reaching toward the outcome instead of the effort, toward the result instead of the character. The anxiety doesn't disappear exactly, but it loses its hold, because now you are no longer waiting for the world to give you something. You are already giving it to yourself. There is a practice that the Stoics called fantasia kataleptike. It doesn't translate neatly, but it means something like the disciplined perception of reality. Here is what it looks like in ordinary life. You receive a difficult email from your employer. Your first perception, automatic, emotional, immediate, is this is a threat. This is an attack. My livelihood is in danger. The Stoic practice is to pause before that perception becomes a story, to look at what actually happened, stripped of all the narrative you've wrapped around it. An email was sent. Words appeared on a screen. That is what happened. Everything else, the meaning, the threat, the catastrophe, that was added by you, by your history, your fears, your patterns of interpretation. The difficult email is still there, but now it is just an email. And an email can be handled. A catastrophe is much harder. This is the core movement in Stoic thought, from reaction to response, from interpretation to perception, from noise to clarity. And it is a movement you can practice right now, in the middle of an ordinary day, in the middle of the noise. Here is perhaps the most radical practice of all, and the one most people reflexively resist. The Stoics thought about death, often, deliberately. They had a phrase for it, memento mori. Remember that you will die. Carved into rings, written in journals, whispered before sleep. Why would anyone do this willingly? Why would you add the contemplation of death to an already noisy and anxious life? Because the Stoics understood something that takes most people decades, sometimes an entire lifetime, to learn. When you forget that life is finite, you treat it as though it is infinite. You postpone, you defer, you assume there will always be more time to be kinder, more patient, more present, more yourself. And then one day you realize, with a shock that no philosophy can fully prepare you for, that there won't be. But when you remember, when you hold it gently in your mind each morning, the fact that this day is a gift and not a guarantee, something shifts. The small irritations become smaller. The beautiful moments become more vivid. Memento mori is not about depression. It is about presence. It is about waking up. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, it is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live. The Stoics were not afraid of death. They were afraid of a life unlived, of a mind that never went quiet enough to actually hear itself. And perhaps that is the deepest noise of all, the noise of a life spent on the surface. Here is the truth about all of this. You will forget repeatedly. You will practice clarity and then react. You will hold the inner citadel and then abandon it. You will remember death and then spend 3 hours worrying about something that doesn't matter. This is not failure. This is the practice. This is the unsexy truth about inner peace. It is not found once and kept forever. It is found and lost and found again. It is a practice, not a possession. The Stoics were not enlightened beings who floated above the noise of the world. They were people, complicated, struggling, sometimes failing, who chose over and over again to return to what they knew was true. That is all that is being asked of you. Not perfection, not constant calm, not the permanent silencing of every anxious thought, just the willingness to return again and again to your breath, to your values, to what is actually yours to carry, to this moment, which is the only one that has ever truly been real. Now, I want to come back to the idea I mentioned at the very beginning, the one principle at the heart of Stoic thought. It is not complex. The Stoics believed that complexity was often just another form of noise. Here it is, stripped bare. The quality of your life is determined not by what happens to you, but by the quality of your inner life, the state of your mind, the integrity of your character, the depth of your attention. That's it. Everything else, the 8 habits, the dichotomy of control, the inner citadel, memento mori, they are all different doors into this one room. The room where you discover that you already have what you were looking for. When your inner life is cultivated, when you practice clarity and presence and honest self-reflection, the noise doesn't disappear, but it no longer defines you. You become, slowly, over time, through daily practice, the kind of person who can stand in the middle of chaos and feel, somewhere deep in the chest, a stillness that nothing outside can touch. And here is the quiet miracle of it. They built it in the middle of wars and betrayals and plagues and loss. They built it without apps or retreats or perfect circumstances. They built it with nothing more than a willingness to pay attention, to ask hard questions, to return each day to what they knew was true. So can you think back to the beginning of this, the version of yourself that is completely unbothered, not distant, not cold, not without feeling. That version of you is built here in the small daily choices about what you let into your mind, what you hold on to, what you release, what you return to when you lose your way. The Stoics didn't find peace by escaping the world. They found it by going deeper into themselves than the world could reach. And the world is loud right now, maybe louder than it has ever been. But somewhere beneath that noise, beneath the headlines and the notifications and the inner chatter and the quiet war most of us are fighting every single day, there is a silence that belongs to you. It has always been there. You just have to learn to return to it. That is the Stoic practice. That is the work. And it begins exactly where you are, right now, in this moment. Not tomorrow, not after things calm down. Now,